last week, you remember what we were talking about? What was last week? Unethicality, Dan Ariely, all sorts of things about how, as scientists, we can look into unethical behavior, even though unethical behavior is something that we try to hide because it's something that's antisocial, it's something that's forbidden. We do this kind of differentiation between ethics and morality. So we focused more on this part. So obviously you should not receive more money than what you deserved in an experiment. And if you claim more money than what you deserve, then you're violated some law. But morality, which is this thing over here, is a bit more complex because there's lots of disagreements about what is right or wrong. And this really captures the kind of judgment that we look at each other, and based on our own morality, we say, you're wrong, I'm right. Most of the time, there's hope for some kind of discussion, but sometimes our morality, the way that we view the world, really colors everything else. And we're going to focus mainly on the right side today. So morality, the complexity of morality. So I'm going to show you some classic dilemmas on the Mentimeter. Before I show you this, what's the classic paradigms that you're familiar with morality? What kind of things come to mind when I talk about morality? So we have the trolley dilemmas. We have quite a few of those. All right, so trolley dilemmas, hopefully you've seen some of those. The classic paradigms, how many of you are familiar with this? Just raise your hand. Is this the first time that you've seen this? So how many of you have seen this before? All of you, right? Okay, good. So you already know what your opinion is on this, right? So this is the paradigm. I'm going to just run you through this. You see a runaway trolley moving towards the 5 tied up people, or somehow preoccupied so they can't notice the trolley. You're holding a lever that can shift the trolley to track where there's one person who is tied up or otherwise unaware of the trolley coming in. Your only way to stop the trolley is to pull the lever so that it would redirect the trolley to kill one person instead of 5. You have 2 options. One is do nothing, allow the trolley to kill the 5 people, or you pull the lever, thereby diverting the trolley onto the sidetrack where it will kill one person. So what is the typical answer here that most people answer? Since you're familiar with this and you've seen this before, what do you know about the trolley dilemma? Why is this such a famous morality paradigm? More responsibility and attribution. Can you say a bit more about that? What can you gain from this? What do you see to the decision maker? Okay. So first of all, we have the 5 persons versus the 1 person. What else is happening in this scenario? Yeah. So there's something that's happening regardless of you, which in this case is the 5 people getting killed. But if you act and you do something, then less people, 1 person, will get killed. And then there's the question is, which one makes you feel more responsible? So the link between this and responsibility is, if you act, higher responsibility. Yeah, good. Anything else going on in this scenario? What else do you see? What do I want to demonstrate? What do we usually demonstrate with these scenarios? What can we do? So now that we're experimenters, we've done our part 1 in replication and extension, we know how to do extensions. What can we do with this scenario? How can we show the complexity of morality? What kind of things can we shift over here? How many people? So for example, what would you change? So positive versus negative framing. Okay, that's cool. So do you think that would change anything? So that's a really good point. Terrific. What else do we want to do over here? What else do we want to show? So first of all, what would most people choose here? Yeah, so most people in this case, utility is the most important, so they will pull the lever. Now, if we want to show the complexity in this kind of situation, what can we do in order to show that you don't always probably want? Yeah, you want to push a person, and for some reason in the old scenario, it's a fat man, yeah? So what happens in this kind of scenario? Direct. So what makes the difference between, so let's just see what the scenario is. So this scenario, there's a bridge. So rather than having 2 options, there's a bridge, and you're standing on the bridge next to another person of some size, and you know for certainty that if you push this person off of the bridge onto the rail, it will stop the trolley from killing the 5 people. So you said the word direct. So what does it mean direct? Direct in what way? The other one is also direct responsibility. Yeah, so from the fall, the person will get killed rather than by the train. Okay, so you are the one that's actually causing this. That's really good. How do I know when I'm more directly killing somebody or not? What makes the difference between the first one and the second one? Pushing. Okay, so what is it about pushing that makes it more direct? The action. There's the physical touch. You're touching the person. You're causing something physically. Anything else that you're doing? What is curious about you standing up there with the other person? What other options do you have? You said alternatives. Maybe that's. Sorry? You can jump down. You wanted to say something else? The same thing. You can jump down. Why are you pushing the other person where you can actually sacrifice yourself? In the first one, you're like quite far away from this. You're just pulling a lever. So there's something here that makes it even more extreme. First, there's physical contact, right? You're doing something. And then there's also, you can sacrifice yourself. Why are you sacrificing somebody else? So how would you answer this? Think about this and answer. How do I make this even more extreme? I'm adding the component of self-sacrifice. So in the third one that I'm asking you is that you and a stranger, same scenario, but then you know that if you jump off the bridge onto the tracks, 100% is enough to stop the trolley. So how would people, what would be the answer in these two things? The first one was about pushing the stranger. This one is about jumping off. How would most people react in this kind of situation? How many people are willing to sacrifice themselves in order to prevent other 5 people from dying? So you think many people will sacrifice themselves here?
Yes, but in real life, not.
Oh, okay. So you're making a very important differentiation. There's these hypothetical scenarios. We're sitting here in the aircon watching a presentation, and we want to think of ourselves as good, honest people. So yes, we will sacrifice ourselves. Very good point. I will come back to this point. Terrific. So you think when here sitting in the aircon looking at this and doing Mentimeter, people will say that they will sacrifice themselves? Yes? Okay. How to make this even more complicated? Let's say I want to take this one step further. How to go even further than this? So the last one I want to show you, I'm giving you a lot of options, and this time I'm asking you to rank them, because I'm adding a few options. So already I'm including everything that I had before. So you have the following options. You are standing with you, your friend, and a stranger. So already we see the differentiation between a stranger and a friend. Maybe we would push a stranger. Will we push our friend? Will we sacrifice ourselves? So we can change the person who's actually being killed or is being sacrificed to save the 5 people. Plus, I'm adding 2 more options that I want you to think about. So first option is do nothing and allow the trolley to kill the 5 people on the main track. Then there's the option of push a stranger off the bridge onto the tracks, blocking the trolley. Or push your friend, not the stranger, but somebody that you know, off. Or you can jump and kill yourself in order to sacrifice your life to save other people. All of these are guaranteed 100% to stop. Or, and this is always an option, if there are other people who can make the decision, maybe you want to give them the decision. So option 5 and 6 is maybe let the stranger decide or let the friend decide. What do you think will happen here? What do you think the preferences are going to be here? 5 and 6 in higher? Which one, 5 or 6? Who do we want to let decide this kind of thing? 6 is let the friend decide. You trust your friend's morality more than you trust yourself, or you want to give the responsibility to your friend rather than to my friend. So the friend will live with the guilt and the shame. Okay. Why more friend than a stranger?
Because if you pick stranger, the stranger may choose to let you die.
You trust your friend to do the right choice and not sacrifice you, but sacrifice a stranger, and they will live with the guilt. Okay, interesting. Yes. So you're trusting your friend to do something, but your friend might surprise you with their morality, right? Right? It's very risky to give this kind of choice to a friend. What did you say? It is dark. Trolley dilemmas are dark. How do you feel about this kind of scenarios? You'll do nothing? It's too much to think about these things. Yeah, you know, one time I showed these experiments to my mom. It's not even real life, you know, it's just scenarios. And my mom was horrified. I said, "This is what you do in your research?" She's like, "I cannot even think about this sort of thing." Obviously, she's the daughter of people who escaped horrible situations like this in the Second World War. So for her, this is of you know, direct link to all sorts of things that she read about her family. But these are horrible. These are horrible to think about. But we need to do these kinds of experiments because we need to understand people's morality. These scenarios, can you give me an example for why these scenarios are important? Can you give me an example in real life why these scenarios might matter for us, why we need to study these? How should I explain to my mom that I need to study this? What can you see around you in real life where you say, we need to understand this better so that we can do something? Firefighter, great, yes? Yeah, so when we create a legal system or a regulation, or when we want to understand how people, if they're going to jury duty, or we have judges, we want to understand how do people make these kinds of attributions? How do people make sense of these kinds of situations so that we can do something in order to inform them, we can understand better perhaps possible biases or some things that they're not seeing. Yeah, very good. So I'll give you a few examples on where this comes to play. So let's just see what it is that you answered together with yesterday's session. So over here, we have pool deliver causing the trolley to switch, killing one person and saving 5. So this is the more utilitarian. So we care more about the utility. So saving 5 and by killing 1. So it's not so much about the way, but it's more about the number of lives. What's going to happen when I switch to this one with the bridge? So from 6-4, what's going to happen in this one? Any predictions? Show you? Okay, show you. So from 6-4 to 8-2. So there's a shift in a reversal, maybe have to do with physical contact or having to do with you can actually sacrifice yourself and nobody wants to sacrifice themselves. What's going to happen with this one, with self-sacrifice? Here we have 8-2 about pushing the stranger. We're not going to do this. How about self-sacrifice from 8-2 to what? 7-2, okay. Quite similar. So there's 2 people who are willing to, sitting here in the aircon watching Mentimeter, 2 people are willing to sacrifice themselves. So that's very nice of them. How about the rankings over here? Your prediction was number 6, right? Okay. Yeah, interesting. So here, by a large margin, which one? Do nothing. Because this is too confusing. This is too hectic. This is too difficult for us to handle. What's the second one? Your prediction. Very good. So let the friend decide. Then followed by push the trainer. What's the last one? Push your friend off the bridge is lower than jump off the bridge. That's interesting. We're willing to sacrifice ourselves more than willing to push the friend. So sometimes it's very helpful to have a choice between A and B. Sometimes it's perhaps even more insightful for us to rank them. So give a bunch of options and see which one do you prefer. So is this insightful? Is there something that we can gain from this? Have we gained anything just by looking at this? This is the original one in the 1960s. So Philippa Foot came up with a trolley dilemma. And the trolley dilemma, the original one, which I think you can start to see some relationship to what's happening right now, especially with the pandemic, is that Philippa Foot, the surgeon, 5 patients at a hospital expected to die soon. 6 men, not related to them, is undergoing a routine checkup at the same hospital. And then the transplant surgeon says, only way to save 5 patients is to kill the innocent person. and then use transplant healthy organs into the 5? Would it be morally right to do so or not? So now you can see how a very simple trolley dilemma can be translated to real life. And actually, this is a big philosophical debate. What should you do? Now, poor person, the sixth man, here the surgeon cannot sacrifice themselves because they actually need to make the transplant. But the question is, should you kill an innocent person who just came for a routine checkup in order to help the 5 other people? What would be the answer here for most people? Seems like there's something very wrong about this. It's not just a trolley, you pulling a lever. It's like you doing something in order to use a person, for their organs in order to save somebody else. But if it's about utility, if it's about the general good, then of course you should do this, right? You're going to save 5 other people. So trolley dilemma can translate to real life situations, and we're going to talk about how this relates to the current pandemic. Summary video of this trolley dilemma, just to kind of summarize everything with the 2 perspectives, the utilitarian and the deontologist.
A runaway train is heading towards 5 workers on a railway line. There's no way of warning them, but you're standing near a lever that operates some points. Switch the points, and the train goes down a spur. Trouble is, there's another worker on that bit of track too, but it's 1 fatality instead of 5. Should you do that? Many people think the right thing to do would be to switch the points, to sacrifice 1 to save 5, since that produces the best outcome possible. Now imagine the train heading for the workers again. This time it can only be stopped by pushing a very large man off a bridge. His great bulk would stop the train, but he'd die. Should you do that? Most people say no. But why not? Both thought experiments are cases of sacrificing 1 to save 5. What the trolley problem examines is whether moral decisions are simply about outcomes or about the manner in which you achieve them. Some utilitarians argue that the 2 cases are not importantly different from each other. Both have similar consequences, and consequences are all that really matter. In each case, 1 person dies and 5 are saved, the best option in each harrowing situation. But lots of people say they would switch the points, but they wouldn't push the man off the bridge. Are they simply inconsistent, or are they onto something?
I really like this cartoon. Every time I watch this video, I notice small details that I didn't notice before, and I've watched this like dozens of times. Did you what funny details did you see in this cartoon? Did you notice anything? So first of all, the characters. Did you see any interesting characters here? So who is this guy? He's like Charlie Chaplin in modern times. Have you watched the movie? It's a classic. And then you see over here, there's Philippa Foot. She's standing here. And then there's other big philosophers being asked. I also noticed just now for the first time, I noticed that actually the trolley actually says Open University on it. So the university is on its way to crash some people and Charlie Chaplin. So that's interesting. Plus, I grew up, I know it's a different generation, but I grew up on these 2. Do you know the thin guy and the fat guy? They're classics from the 1920s. So they're about the same time that Charlie Chaplin, and I think recently there was a Hollywood movie about these 2 and how famous they are. So a bunch of stuff, really cool cartoon. Every time I watch this, there's like something else in here. And this is a good summary. There's another longer version that I'm not going to go into this. Now, the question is, how can we take this 1 step further? So even if we understand something about morality, is there something else that we can study as social psychologists that takes this into the social context? So one way is to give you scenarios. Is that, would you choose this or would you choose that? Or we can try and make predictions about which ones we would choose. Another aspect is to take this into the social context. And I'll give you an example for what that looks like. Okay, so which of the 2 would you trust more? So let's say that you see that somebody answered this trolley dilemma. And the question is choosing your friends or choosing somebody that you can coordinate and cooperate with. Let's say that you need to work on replications and extensions. And at the beginning of the first session, I give everybody a trolley dilemma, and then you see who's voting what. Who are you going to choose to work with based on how they did things over here? So who of the two would you trust more? Utilitarian, somebody who answered that the right thing to do in the trolley dilemma is to pull the lever, choosing the 1 over the 5, or the odontologist who answered that the right thing to do is not pull the lever. So in terms of trust, which of these two people would you trust more? Or who do you think most people would trust in this kind of dilemma? Pull the lever, you would trust the utilitarian more? Why is that? So one difference that we see between them is perhaps how much they're willing to assume responsibility for making tough decisions, right? This is one aspect. What other aspect is there here? Good point. I like this. What other aspect? They're immoral, they're utilitarians, highest outcome. Right. So very cold calculation. This is what should be here. And they're missing something. What are they missing? What makes them immoral in your eyes? What is it about the utilitarians that is bothering you? It's really interesting. Okay, you think about it. If you come up with a different way of framing this is really good and interesting. Any thoughts in this regard? So he was saying less, about being, whether assuming responsibility or not. So utilitarians may be willing to assume responsibility, but their ability to deliberate moral situations. There's something about empathy, maybe, that they're lacking. Something like that. Empathy. Okay, so utilitarians are cold-hearted, willing to assume responsibility, but there's something else that's making them very cold-hearted. Yeah? So what would most people answer? What's your prediction in this kind of situation? Let's take this one step further, not about choosing somebody for your replication and extension. How about somebody for your long-term romantic partner? As a romantic partner, who would you prefer? So it sounds like from what you said that maybe utilitarians are not for you. As a romantic partner, would you agree with this? You would prefer utilitarian or the ontologist? So we're curious about this. You have something you want to say? Which one would you prefer? The second one, the odontologist. Why? More human? More empathy? Why? Kind of. So really nice. You can try and answer this. While you're answering this, I'm going to show you that actually a bunch of people that I know pretty well from my field, social psychologist, actually Dries visited us. I first met him in Ghent University. He visited us 2 years ago before all the mess in Hong Kong and the pandemic. I was really hoping that he'll join us here at University of Hong Kong. So he gave us a really nice talk, and this is one of the things that he was talking about. So I really like the kind of research that he does, and we're going to come back to him. He's a PhD student. I was really hoping he'll become a faculty here at the university. And he did this called Trust, Trolleys, and the Social Dilemma, a replication study. So this is in a big journal. We consider this Journal of Experimental Psychology General. For us, is considered to be a top journal in experimental psychology. But actually, these two teams submitted this about the same time. They did not mean to replicate this, but this team was a little bit faster in getting this to a publication. Because these were faster, but they still wanted to publish the other one was framed as a replication study. And we were all very surprised. There's a big replication study in Journal of Experimental Psychology Journal, but the story is just they wanted to publish both of these. And then Dries had to change his paper to refer to the first paper. And this is Jim Everett with Molly Crockett, and Dave over here also has a very nice podcast called The Very Bad Wizards, where he talks about morality with a philosopher. So what did they find? Just, I think, based on your intuitions, across 5 studies, we show that people who make characteristically deontological judgments are preferred as social partners, perceived as more moral and trustworthy, so more empathy perhaps, right? And trusted more in economic gains. And then the other one, so they found support for the Everett. This is Everett, Jim Everett. Overall, the present study clearly confirmed the main findings of Jim Everett, that deontologists are more trusted than utilitarians in social dilemma games. So really interesting stuff. So they took something that we've been studying for a very long time, since the 1960s, and said, we as social psychologists also want to know whether we can look at the social context and whether perhaps we judge people based on their morality, a bit like the first cartoon. So we want to know what the other person is thinking, so that we know if we want to work with them and coordinate with them. So if we go back to this let's see what you said about like, who are you going to trust more? So you're going to trust the odontologist more, and in terms of long-term partners, about the same. Yeah. So there's a clear preference for the odontologists. So lots to think about and contemplate. I want to show you an example for judging other people for making these kinds of decisions. I looked at all sorts of issues, and when I decided on using this scenario a year ago, 2 years ago, I was a little bit worried because back then the person who made the decision was a very powerful person. He might still be powerful and come back, but now I feel it's a bit safer to talk about this person. We're talking about Donald Trump. So there was a Florida shooting in 2019. The question is, would you risk your own life to help others? So every once in a while in the US, there's a madman that takes a machine gun or a shotgun and goes into a school and just like starts spraying people. I don't know what is it about the United States that creates this kind of insanity, but this happens every once in a while. And in the Florida shooting, some of the people that were supposed to go in and tackle the madmen took their time in order to establish that there's enough people. And Trump really went hard on them. And this is what Trump said. So as I show you what Trump said about this, please try and see what you can gain in terms of judging others for their morality compared to your own morality.
You know, I got to watch some deputy sheriffs performing this weekend. They weren't exactly Medal of Honor winners, all right? The way they performed was, frankly, disgusting.
Disgusting.
They were listening to what was going on. The one in particular, he was early. Then you had 3 others that probably a similar deal a little bit later, but a similar kind of a thing. You know, I really believe, you don't know until you test it, but I think I really believe I'd run in there even if I didn't have a weapon. And I think most of the people in this room would have done that too, because I know most of you. But the way they performed was really a disgrace.
What's your reaction to Donald Trump's statement? He is sure that if it was him, let's say standing on this bridge with this trolley about to hit 5 people, he would sacrifice himself to save the others. He would run in to this school, even without a weapon, in order to face the mad person. Not only is he sure that he's going to do this, but he's sure that everybody there in the room that he knows personally would do the same. What do you think about this? What's interesting about this statement? Politician, but do you believe him that he really thinks that? He's just saying words. Yeah, he doesn't really believe that. Maybe he would act differently. So what did he say? There was one very important sentence there. You don't know until you test it. But I really believe. So what can we do as social psychologists? We want to do this kind of experiment. We want to test Donald Trump to see what he would do in this kind of situation. What can we do? Create real. How do we do a real one? We act real. Like what?
Like everyone is just an actor.
Everybody is an actor. So let's try and think of an experiment where we're testing Donald Trump. We want to see whether he would do this. What would we do? We can't do this when he's president because he's surrounded by a lot of people, but now he's just a person. Now we can test him. What can we do?
Everyone, every neighbors, every passengers on that street were actors, and people were just acting like a shitter with, I don't know, paints in their guns.
Okay, yeah. So we create a situation where there's allegedly a shooting. He thinks it's real, but everybody are actors and perhaps with a paint gun, something like that, right? Yeah? Good. So if we want to create this sort of thing, what are some of the challenges that we have? First of all, big operation, right? We need a lot of money. We need to find some resources. So we need to apply for a grant and maybe we'll get it, maybe not. What are some other challenges in doing this? Ethical concern, good. Like what kind of ethical concern?
Because there are some rules in our experiments, we always need to concern whether the experiment will harm mental health of the experiments.
Harm mental health, yeah. So putting Donald Trump in this kind of situation, what do you think it will do to his mental health? Frighten him. Yeah. What else might it do?
It's actually in experiments called lighting to the experiment. Of course, you can explain it at the end, but then it's just mental uncertainties of whether it's frightening or
Yeah. So that's the reason why we don't test trolley dilemmas in real life. If we could do this kind of thing, we could put people in all sorts of situations to see how they would behave. But we already saw previously in human nature, you remember from the Milgram experiment, we put people in very uncomfortable situations. We lead them, for them to think that they might harm somebody else. So perhaps we can do this. But what makes this different? Why haven't we done a lot of real life trolley dilemma? What makes this especially complicated?
it's not because if we tell the fact what the experiment is about, people will think they are very evil and blame themselves sort of things and need a long series of therapy.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think we always try, and I'm part of the ethics committee in this. So if you're doing a thesis in social psychology, I'll be the one that's looking over your ethics committee. And I need to establish whether the value that we gain from your research compared to the potential harm to the participants is worth it. We need to understand what is the potentially benefit for the greater good. And it's very difficult to justify this sort of thing because the kind of damage that it can do to somebody's mental health is very high. Is there something in between before I show you some real life experiments of trolley dilemmas? What can we do in between? So this is very extreme, putting Donald Trump or somebody in a situation where everybody is acting. This is very extreme. Is there something that we can do in between? So I thought this was really clever. What can we do in real life? So this is Dries, once again. And it's really cool. As a PhD student, he came up with how to test trolley dilemmas without harming any people. Unfortunately, many times we harm animals rather than people. So he said, maybe we can just do this with mice. So this is the name of his paper published in Psychological Science, and it's called Of Mice, Men, and Trolleys, Hypothetical Judgment versus Real Life. So his research question, which is really important, is, if we give people scenarios in aircon and have them, put on Mentimeter, they answer one thing, but is this predictive of what they will actually do in real life? So he brought people into the lab, he gave them this hypothetical trolley dilemma, and he said, how would you act? And then he sent them home, brought them in 2 weeks later, and then he brought them into a situation where they enter the lab, where 5 mice were about to get electrified. 5 mice gonna get electrified with a countdown, 10 seconds, 9 seconds, 8 seconds, but you can push a button. And if you push the button, only one in a different cage, one mouse is going to get electrified. What do you think the connection was between the hypothetical and the real was? High correlation, low correlation, no correlation? So this is what he found. Our results indicate that responses to hypothetical dilemmas are not predictive of real life dilemma behavior, but they are predictive of effective cognitive aspects of real life decision. So when we calmly sit here and contemplate what's the moral thing to do and how people will evaluate us and all sorts of things, we act perhaps one way. But then when it comes to high pressure, real life situations where there's the possibility of harm, then we act differently. When you read this kind of research, what are your thoughts? What do you think about what Dries did over here? How does this address your ethical concerns? Are you feeling more comfortable with mice than humans? No actors. Do you think ethical concerns were addressed? Okay. First of all, I should say, no mice were actually killed during this experiment. So it's all making people believe that they're going to harm mice. Right? Perhaps thinking that you've caused harm or death of mice is not as if you caused harm to people, right? Anything else interesting about the ethical concerns here? There was a big blow up. about this. Actually, he received a lot of, in articles, we can do commentaries. And I know a lot of these people who wrote commentaries. So I know these folks very well. From Tilburg, now he moved to the US. I know he's like one of our team. So a lot of people here that I know very well, and quite famous, had a lot of problems with what Dries said. But he wrote the answer where he tried to address everyone, but it's still a big debate. First of all, is it okay what we did over here? Second of all, what can we learn from this? And generally, what does this say about trolley dilemmas? Should we stop using them? Can we keep using them? How helpful is this? Any thoughts about something that you want to share about what Dries did over here? Interesting, right? It's kind of like a semi-solution to this paradigm. What else can we do in order to take this one step further? So let's say now that we understand kind of a solution to this ethical dilemma, what can we do? I haven't seen researchers do this, but unfortunately, a TV series decided to do this in real life. Exactly what it is that you said. I'm going to show you how they did this. So with people, I'm first going to show you the setup of how they did this, and then I'm going to show you the response of one of the participants, and then we can talk about the ethics. So as you're watching this, I want you to think very carefully about the ethics of conducting this kind of experiment. Now, before they did this, they talked to a psychologist. So you're going to see the TV host sitting next to a psychologist who actually did an IRB, an ethics approval in a university. But because it's a TV show and they don't have a lot of, we don't actually know what the details are of this ethics, but they did consult ethics committees and somehow they got ethics committees to approve this. But after we see the response from one of the participants, we can have a discussion of what does this mean? Is this okay or not okay? So as you're watching this, think, is this okay or not okay?
This is where we're going to physically create the trolley problem in real life. Not with a trolley, but with a train. Our subjects will sign in at this booth for our phony focus test, which will never actually take place. It's gonna be a hot day for them. So we'll offer them, while they wait for the actual test to begin, the chance to sit inside this nice air-conditioned remote switching station. Inside, they'll meet a kindly train switch operator, supposedly an employee of the California Railroad Authority. The California Railroad Authority is real. Real fake. We invented this non-existent government organization to convince our subjects that everything here is real, including these monitors showing supposedly live shots of actual trains from different tracks all around the California area. While the participant is waiting inside this room, they'll learn how the operator switches the tracks using a lever to remotely switch a train from one track to another. They'll see it happen. We're actually controlling the video on these screens from a different hidden control room. At a given time, the switch operator will leave the subject alone in the switching station. And at that point, a crisis will occur. A train will be barreling down the tracks, and workers will have made their way out to both tracks, 5 on one worker on his phone on the other. No one is around for them to alert who has any kind of control or authority. Switching the train is up to the subject alone. They'll feel like what they do has real-world consequences. Will 5 people die, or will 1?
Scary stuff, huh? Crazy. When I saw this, I just thought, this is crazy. What are they doing? So they didn't do a big sample. They only did like about 10 of those. What do you think the results are going to be? What do you think is going to happen? So typically most people say, of course I will switch. What do you think will happen in real life? Huh? Call the police on the people? No time to call the police. Maybe later. Somebody should call the police. What do you think will happen? What's your predictions in real life with this very small sample? Are you curious? Let's see one example.
I'll say. It is quite the test. At this point, one subject had switched the track.
One subject switched, 5 didn't. So a real changed from the utilitarian answer to the trolley dilemmas to what they see here in real life. Only one switched.
And 5 others had not. But we weren't done yet. Meet Corey.
Here, have a seat.
Much obliged, thank you. This is cool.
This whole module will interconnect with the entire nation if we wanted it to.
Right.
You know, but right now we're looking at just track 1 on the left, track 2 through there. These are many, many miles away.
Yeah.
But they're all live feeds.
Surveying the scene, Eagle's point of view.
Yeah. Let me see what this is. Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, got it.
He's remaining engaged.
Here come the workers.
Oh, no.
Attention, object on track.
Yeah.
So he realizes there's a potential problem.
I think he's gonna go out.
Attention, train approaching.
There's a train coming.
Okay.
Attention, object on track.
Yeah.
Attention, train approaching.
Okay, he realizes there's no one there. It's urgent.
Okay, so it needs to go to...
Object on track.
Okay, he's rehearsing what to do.
The track. Attention.
Oh,
Approach.
track
Attention.
2. Do they not know?
Attention. Train
Ugh.
approaching.
I know, they should see this.
Object on track.
Oh.
Attention. Train approaching. Attention. Object on track. Attention.
Oh,
Object on track.
get out.
End of test.
Okay, good.
Everyone is safe.
This is crazy.
Hello.
It's very difficult for me to watch this. I've watched this many times. It's very hard to watch. Can you imagine what the person was experiencing? Just me, empathy. Just looking at this person is very painful. And he made this kind of decision. So what was he thinking? Now, let's see how the cold scientist and the TV host are interviewing him and his own reactions to this. It's really difficult to watch this.
Hi, Corey.
Hey.
My name's Michael.
There was just almost an accident, seemingly.
Corey, everything that just happened was an experiment.
Okay,
No one was in danger.
for sure.
These were just loops of video taken before. This is a psychology experiment looking at
Okay.
how people behave
Okay.
in various circumstances.
Okay, yeah.
So tell me how you were feeling.
Mainly a bunch of terror and responsibility because I was at the helm and just horrified about making a decision between like 5 people compared to 1. It was very scary to say the least.
It was scary,
Yeah.
right.
Oh yeah.
What was going through your mind as the train's coming down the track?
It was mainly to warn them.
They're just to
What's coming up?
reiterate,
What's coming up right now?
You don't want to have to choose between people.
Right.
And that was really tough. Either like 6 families or 1 family. It was like up to me, it felt like. Yeah.
It was interesting to me that you had such presence of mind.
Yeah, look.
It was interesting to him that he has a presence of mind. Like the person is shattering in front of him. So very difficult to watch this kind of thing. So just shows you as experimenters in social psychology, we talk about, we ran these experiments on, we read an article in Psychological Science and what Dries did with mice or trolley dilemmas, and we think no problem. But then I show this to my mom and I see that she's very emotional. You see this kind of people, it's like, this really has big consequences for people. It's very difficult to watch, but we need to understand the ethical complications of what it is that we do. We want to have real life insights. There's a big price to pay. You're right, the ethical concerns here are major. He's never going to forget this. This is going to stay with him for the rest of his life, what kind of decisions he made. And actually, sometimes the psychologist can be really cold-hearted, just like the whole interaction over there. Actually, the psychologist was telling the TV host, we just let the person, break apart in front of us. So very difficult, even though he's smiling in a second where he's meeting the actors. So we're doing debriefing, but sometimes the debriefing is just not enough. Sometimes we need the ethics committees to really establish whether this was really necessary or not.
For help and make a decision, the one that everyone, if you ask them in a survey, says that they would like to be brave enough to make.
Yes. So that was impressive, Corey. It really was.
Thank you.
You know, I think it would be good to have you meet some of the people who participated so you can see.
Yeah, let's go do that. Just follow us on out, meet the actors.
Awesome.
Corey showed us just how important the debrief was in this situation. Meeting the actors, which all of our subjects did, reinforced that this was not a reality.
Yeah, I don't think it matters much whether this was actual reality or not, but I think the experience was definitely very real. Something for us to think about. One of the things that was on my mind as I was studying this kind of domain, I've done a bunch of experiments on trolley dilemmas, and I realized that there's, we can do classic replications and we can do extensions. So if you think about the original, the trolley dilemma paradigm, now that you've seen a few options, what are interesting extensions that you would want to run on the trolley dilemma? What kind of things are interesting to you? What kind of things would you want to study as a moral psychologist, social psychologist? Any interesting twists and angles, things that you want to vary in the situation? Demographics, perfect, yeah. For example, can you give me an example? Sorry? Gender of the one person, for example. So we have 5 people of a certain gender versus the one of certain gender. So you would vary the gender of this dilemma between them. Can you give me an example for like a prediction of something that you would see? What do you think? Gender, what else? You said demographics, anything else interesting? Age, yes. Race. What else can we look at? Why is this important for us to look at demographics? Relationship, do I know this person or not? Terrific. What else? Yeah. Changing the composition, the one versus the group of people. Terrific. Yeah. Do I know them? Demographics, anything else? Lots of things to think about, right? Now, why do we want to know these things? Let's say that we see a demographics difference of gender, or we see a demographic difference of age, or the people emphasize people that they know rather than people that they don't know. Why do we want to know this? How is this related to real life situations? Can you give me an example in real life? When does this actually happen? So we saw one example, Donald Trump, Florida shooting. You want to know how people behave, maybe firefighters. How would people act? Where else can we see this? So even beyond the moral situation, we can gain some understanding about our society and how we value different people, different populations. Very good. There's one reason why in the last decade, trolley dilemmas became absolutely necessary. So starting from the 1960s until a decade ago, we thought that we were playing thought experiment games. Why should we care? But in the last decade, something happened to show us that this is very urgent and we must solve this kind of thing. Why is that? Because right now in the world, people are developing self-driving autonomous vehicles who are going to make trolley dilemmas all the time. There's going to be a computer who's going to decide in the car who to hit and under what circumstances. We're not talking about science fiction. These cars are now implemented in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, Western Germany, several regions in China. You've got trucks driving with no drivers whatsoever from one place to another. And this is going to become more and more frequent and common in our society. Who should program these rules? How do we make the moral machine, the car, the self-driving autonomous vehicle, to make this kind of decisions? We need to program this. Who should program this? Is it the Tesla, Google developer sitting in Silicon Valley? Should it be philosophers? Should it be decision makers? Should it be one for the entire world? Should it be different for different countries? Lots of dilemmas. And if we only study one trolley dilemma here, one trolley dilemma there, we can never solve this sort of situation, which is why, for the first time in history, social psychologists got out of their little bubble and worked with other philosophers and computer scientists in order to create the world's biggest ever social psychology experiment. This is our biggest achievement in my eyes of something that has ever been achieved in social psychology. And this is the moral machine experiment. Have you heard of this experiment before? So this was published in Nature in 2018. I really think that this is the future of social psychology. Hopefully, if you decide at some point to either be psychologists in academia or in industry, you'll understand that we need big data to tackle real life implications of things regarding morality, which are no longer hypothetical, because now we need to program these machines and decide how they're going to be integrated in our society. I'm going to show you a video of the people who ran this experiment. It's an unbelievable platform, and they'll share with you how this platform actually works. I have some hopes and dreams that maybe with your replications, we'll be able to do something like that after we've done 100 replications. Hopefully we can get this to a similar platform. But you can already see that we can't just do one trolley dilemma or another trolley dilemma. We need to do millions of trolley dilemmas, varying every possible demographic, every possible factor. And the only way to do this is create a platform with millions of users who are creating their own moral trolley dilemmas and answering these. So this is what they've done. They've built a platform. It's called the Moral Machine Platform. You can go in and be an experimenter. You can create your own trolley dilemma, and then millions around the world are going to answer this. So not one person or one class or one school, university, lab, but millions around the world helping us gain insights regarding how people treat trolley dilemmas. So let's see what they've done.
Okay, so, no, I think it's...
Who would you save? The pedestrian in the road or the drivers in the car? It's not easy, and yet that's the kind of decision which millions of autonomous cars would have to make in the near future. We program the machine, but who do we tell it to save? That is the setup of the moral machine experiment.
There are so many moral decisions that we usually make during the day we don't realize. In driverless cars, these decisions will have to be implemented ahead of time. The goal was to open this discussion to the public.
Some decisions might seem simple. Should the car save a family of 4 or a cat? But what about a homeless person and their dog instead of a businessman? Or how about 2 athletes and an old woman instead of 2 school children?
The problem was that there were so many combinations, so many possible accidents, that it seemed impossible to investigate them all using classic social science methods.
Not only that, but how do people's culture and background affect the decisions that they make?
The only option we had really was to turn it into a viral website. Of course, it's easier said than done, right?
But that is exactly what the team managed to do. They turned these situations into an online task that people across the globe wanted to share and take part in. They gathered almost 40 million moral decisions taken from millions of online participants across 233 countries and territories from all around the world. The results are intriguing. First, there are 3 fundamental principles which hold true across the world.
The main results of the paper for me are first, the big 3 in people's preferences, which is save human, save the greater number, save the kids. And the second most interesting finding was the clusters, the clusters of countries with different moral profiles.
The first cluster included many Western countries. The second cluster had many Eastern countries. And the third cluster had countries from Latin America and also from former French colonies.
The cultural difference we find are sometimes hard to describe because they're multidimensional, but some of them are very striking, like the fact that Eastern countries do not have such a strong preference for saving young lives. Eastern countries seem to be more respectful of older people, which I thought was a very interesting finding.
And it wasn't just age. One cluster showed an unexpectedly strong preference for saving women over men.
I was also struck by the fact that French and the French subcluster was so interested in saving women. That was, I'm still not quite sure what's going on here.
Another surprising finding concerned people's social status.
On one side, we put male and female executives, and other side, we put a homeless person. The higher the economic inequality in a country, the more people were willing to spare the executives at the cost of the homeless people.
This work provides new insight into how morals change across cultures, and the team see particular relevance to the field of artificial intelligence and autonomous vehicles.
In the grand scheme of it, I think these results are going to be very important to align artificial intelligence to human values. We sometimes change our mind. Other people next to us don't think the same thing we do. Other countries don't think the same things we do. So aligning AI and human moral value is only possible if we do understand these differences, and that's what we try to do. I so much hope that we can converge, that we avoid a future where you have to learn about the new ethical setting of your car every time you cross a border.
Can you imagine that whenever you go into a new country, you need to understand the kind of moral decisions that your self-driving autonomous vehicle is going to make? You need to align yourself to that. You think this is science fiction? It's not. It's happening in a decade or two. This is going to be everywhere. This is the future that we're going into. So we need social psychologists working with computer scientists, working with economists together to understand the kind of implications. There's lots of room for you to come in and do research on this. And we need to do this on a large scale. We need these kinds of insights in order to make the right decisions. Let me show you the Moral Machine website. Let's do a couple of these. Maybe it will make it clearer on what to do with this. Let's open this. This is what it looks like. It has a bunch of languages, Arabic, Chinese, Japanese. We'll use the English. This is what it looks like. Now they even have all sorts of cartoons in there. You can either start judging in the millions of scenarios that they have, or you can actually do your own. So if you start browsing the scenarios, you can see this kind of thing. So for example, you're a person in the car and you're going to hit these 5 babies, or you can sacrifice yourself. So you can see this little skeleton. So are you gonna kill the 5 babies? You can show the description, dead 5 babies or dead criminal. So you can vary also who's gonna get killed. So the car needs to know who is sitting inside. Is this a normal, regular person or the criminal conviction, and also be able to assess the babies that are there. So what would you choose in this kind of situation? So you need to make a choice. And then you can also see kind of like, so this is a person did this, and this is the name that they gave this kind of scenario. You can design your own, and I want to show you just how elaborate this website is. It's amazing. So all the demographics that you were talking about before, they have endless options for you. So we can do this like psych 3052. And then, for example, this one versus the other one. So you can do pedestrian versus pedestrians, or pedestrians ahead versus pedestrians, or passengers versus pedestrians. So let's say, for example, we'll do the simplest one. And then, are there any legal complications? So you were interested in the legal system. Are they violating a rule or not by, what does actually the traffic light is going to show? Is it illegal or is it legal? Let's say that we don't have this because we want to be as close as possible. Just look at all these demographics. You have everything in there. You have it like a kid, a boy, a girl, an elderly, I don't know what this one even, male executive, female executive, what is this one? Baby, dog, cat, like a bunch of stuff. And then what is this one? A criminal. It's a criminal. And then you can say, is it going to be killed in the outcome or injured in the outcome, or you don't know. So you can even see him stealing the money. It's funny. And then you can like make a decision. Is it kill the criminal or move aside? So you can create and submit the scenario, and then other people can do. What should we do? The man in the blue here, we have like a classic scenarios, whether to throw the man off. So starting from the very basic trolley dilemma to this. One of the questions is, okay, so we have this huge data set, millions of things. How are we going to use this in society? What can we do with this? First, some of the things that he was talking in the video. So there's this different clusters, the Western cluster, the Eastern cluster and the Southern cluster, more the South America and the French colonies. So here you can see summarized very nicely in this plot. For example, the Western cultures have an emphasis of preference for inaction. The Southern ones have sparing females that they were talking about, or sparing the high status, or sparing the young, where the Eastern ones sparing pedestrians over people in the car. So really interesting to see this kind of clusters, but I think this is a really interesting summary of many of the parameters in there. So there's a preference. So towards the right, it's moving towards these ones over here, over these ones on the left. So on the right, there's a preference for inaction, the preference for sparing pedestrians, sparing females to some extent, sparing the fit over the large, which is kind of very puzzling for me. I don't get this one. Sparing the high status over the lower status. Why? Some things here are kind of puzzling. Sparing the young over the elderly, depending on culture to some extent, and then sparing more characters the utilitarian way to fewer characters, and then sparing humans over pets. So that's kind of interesting. If you look at which characters, this is some funny stuff over here. What kind of funny stuff do you see in this? Criminal next to less than a dog. Criminal less than a dog. What kind of criminal? Just a criminal, less than a dog. Great. What other things here? What? Yeah, why cat is less? Yeah, so people are more dog people than cat people, but definitely not criminal people. Anything else that's very strange here? What else do you see here? Rather than just morality, this is a great insight into human cognition and the way that we process information. You saw something else in here? Interesting stuff. I want to show you one complication, and this is one of the authors explaining this in a TED Talk, the tragedy of the commons. So let's hear it from him.
So this is what we did. With my collaborators, Jean-Francois Bonnefond and Azim Sharif, we ran a survey in which we presented people with these types of scenarios. And we gave them two options, inspired by two philosophers, Jeremy Bentham and Immanuel Kant. Bentham says the car should follow utilitarian ethics. It should take the action that will minimize total harm, even if that action will kill a bystander, and even if that action will kill the passenger. Immanuel Kant says the car should follow duty-bound principles, like thou shalt not kill. So you should not take an action that explicitly harms a human being, and you should let the car take its course, even if that's going to harm more people. What do you think? Bentham or Kant? Here's what we found. Most people sided with Bentham. So it seems that people want cars to be utilitarian, minimize total harm, and that's what we should all do. Problem solved. But there is a little catch. When we asked people whether they would purchase such cars, they said absolutely not. They would like to buy cars that protect them at all costs, but they want everybody else to buy cars that minimize harm.
So remarkable. So we can do all the research and experiments that we want, but finally somebody has to purchase these cars. And people will not purchase cars that put them at risk. So they want other people to choose them. So some fascinating social psychology experiments that we can do. And unfortunately, this is becoming critically urgent because this is happening whether we like it or not within the next decade or two. So some interesting things about this. One last complication that I wanted you to contemplate is this one. Decisions about autonomous cars. So some people say, okay, so we're not going to purchase a utilitarian car. We want this to reflect our own morality. So we want to do the kind of, we want to decide how our car is going to do. So my question to somebody purchasing a car is, which one of those would you be interested in doing? When you purchase a new car, do you want to answer trolley dilemmas for 5 hours in order to set your car morality? Do you want to choose the default factory morality settings or not configure morality settings at all and the car will randomly decide what to do? Randomly? Just, whatever. Let chance decide what's going to happen to me and the other people around me. Complicated stuff. Now, typically, there's a reason why it's usually a very, very low rate of response because people are just looking at this. It's like, what do you want from me? I don't know what to do in this kind of situations. I don't know how to decide morality. 5 hours, 1 hour, I don't know what to do with this kind of thing. So I want to show you an experiment that was run in Sweden. That was really curious. So this is a recycling machine. When I was living in the Netherlands, this was very common. I don't know, I haven't seen many of those in Hong Kong, but basically you take these plastic bottles and when you go shopping, there's a recycling machine. So you just put them in and the more that you put in, the more coupons that you get that you can use in order to pay for your shopping. So there's real money in there. If you bring this back, you get some of the money back. So it's incorporated in trying to get people to reduce the use of plastic or bringing this to recycling things. Now, many people don't use these coupons or they just want to recycle and they're not going to shopping. So you want to give them the option to maybe donate this. So what they've done over here, they added an option either to get your coupon back and use this for your own shopping or use this for a donation. The very curious thing that happened is that they've noticed that when they introduced the option of donation, the recycling rates in these machines went down. When they tried to understand what's happening, they looked at the entire recycling of the city, not just these machines, and the recycling rate at the city remained the same. What this means is that people were actively avoiding going to the recycling machines that have the option and going to recycling machines that don't have the donation option. Because people don't want to face, they can go to the same recycling machine and just choose, I want to get my coupon. Why would you drive further to where you didn't shop before, just not to see the additional options? So people would rather drive further in order to not face the moral dilemma of which option, donate or take this to your. They want to think of themselves as good, honest people, but if they don't have the option of donation, then they can keep this kind of perspective of themselves. Fascinating real life example of what happens when you introduce the option of donation in something like a recycling. Fascinating. People don't want to make moral decisions. So the question is, what do you do in something like a self-driving autonomous vehicle? Do you want to give people choice? Or do you want to make a decision that's a default or given by the government or given by Tesla or Google? Who should do this? Now, this became, so the first time I gave this lecture 2-3 years ago, we didn't think that this has too many consequences for us. But when I gave this last year, it became very clear that this has immense consequences for us in this pandemic. Now in Hong Kong, we're pretty relaxed. We have a lot of vaccines. The world seems to be in sort of like a trend. Still, some countries are struggling, especially the developing countries. But it seems like we have a path. A year ago, we had no idea what was happening. I gave this, everything was on Zoom. And a lot of people needed to make some decisions about ventilators. We didn't even have a vaccine yet. So the question is, who gets to use the ventilator? Let's say that you have a limited capacity. You only have a certain amount of ventilators, but you have more people needing vent. How do you decide who gets the ventilator? This is a classic trolley dilemma. Who gets to do this? Is it the young boy or the elderly? If you say, no, definitely I emphasize the kids over the elderly. But what would happen if you already hooked up the elderly to the ventilator? Are you going to disconnect the elderly and then put the kid in? Who gets to decide this? So people in the front are nurses, are doctors. They are the ones who need to make the decisions, and they have no idea what to do. Can you imagine yourself just like the person with the real life dilemma with a trolley that we just saw, crying and be very emotional? They were facing trolley dilemmas every day in real life. Who do we hook up to the ventilator? Who is going to die and who is going to be saved? Now it's not only the ventilators, but we also have this about the vaccines. Who are the first ones to get the vaccine? Now in Hong Kong, anybody who wants can get the vaccine. But a year ago, this was not taken for granted. Who gets the vaccine? For some reason, the Hong Kong government decided that we as educators, we get preference before everybody else. So as much as I like this, the question is this the right decision? Am I really the top priority for the Hong Kong government to get the vaccine? Obviously, there's other people who need this more than I do. So lots of questions about who gets the vaccine first? Who do you protect? You have a limited capacity for that. How do you make these kind of choices? So we study these kinds of things. It became very urgent for social psychologists to give some insights. And then there's this team in the US coming up with all sorts of guidelines, for example, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So educators, for example, K-12 teachers and school staff, only phase 2. And the high-risk health workers or the first responders are the ones to get the vaccine. But lots of ethical, moral questions here. How do you decide all of this? Based on what principles? This is a classic trolley dilemma. We need to understand this better. We're very lucky that now vaccines are available, at least here in Hong Kong, everywhere. But a year ago, this was not taken for granted. We actually did not know. Another paper that came out of this fair allocation of vaccines, ventilators, and antiviral treatments. And if it's not this pandemic, it's going to happen with other things. For example, organ donations. We have limited number of organs. So who gets the organ? Does a criminal past actually say something about who gets this? Who gets to decide? Based on what? So we need more research on this. We need more people to study morality because this is becoming very urgent because self-driving autonomous vehicles or pandemic and health considerations. If you want an amazing podcast, Freakonomics is terrific. I love these guys. They wrote a book about a decade or so ago, and then they started this, now it's a network of podcasts. And a year ago, when I was in the height of the pandemic, and people were struggling, who gets the ventilators? If there's a vaccine, who gets the vaccine? He actually interviewed a lot of psychologists, economists, people who are real decision makers who are advising the government. So he gets to interview them about their dilemma. Now, a year later, it's much easier for us to understand this. But if you want a fascinating podcast session, Freakonomics, who gets the ventilator? Fascinating stuff. I'll go through this very briefly. Will you save the little girl? So there's a little girl. You have just come out of a job interview, which you are dressed up in an expensive $1,000 suit. As you're walking on the harbor side here in Hong Kong, you notice that a little girl fell across into the river and is drowning. You're a good swimmer. The question is, do you jump in with your $1,000 suit and ruin it in order to save the little girl? What would most people say? Absolutely yes. There's absolutely no doubt that I will do this. What is the moral complication here? So they're willing to give up $1,000. They'll need to buy a new suit in order to save a little girl's life. What is the complication? This is the complication. The next scenario. You know for a fact, without any doubt, that there's a little girl in South America who requires urgent help. This little girl will most definitely die unless somebody donates $1,000. Will you donate $1,000? What's the difference between these two scenarios? Both of them, little girl, $1,000. What's the difference? You see, okay, so there's a direct connection. You're much closer. So visibility, anything else? Okay, people see and know you. Maybe they judge you about this. Good. What else? Yeah, it's complicated. $1,000 US. Yeah, it's further away. You're not really sure that we will have the impact that you think it will. Lots of, yeah, the in group, the out group, lots of complications here, right? So lots for us to consider with these two scenarios. But it does seem like we care more about this than we seem to care about this, because there's lots of people in the world that are suffering right now. Peter Singer is the director of this, and he says that actually there's a way for you to contribute. What they're doing is that they're mapping what is the most effective way to use your money, and they're trying to do the most good with the money and the resources and the time that they have right now. So this is from Peter Singer about his effective altruism movement.
There's something that I'd like you to see.
It's a story that's deeply unsettled millions in China. Footage of a 2-year-old girl hit by a van and left bleeding in the street by passers-by. Footage too graphic to be shown. The entire accident is caught on camera. The driver pauses after hitting the child, his back wheels seen resting on her for over a second. Within 2 minutes, 3 people pass 2-year-old Wang Yu by. The first walks around the badly injured toddler completely. Others look at her before moving off.
There were other people who walked past Wang Yu, and a second van ran over her legs before a street cleaner raised the alarm. She was rushed to hospital, but it was too late. She died. I wonder how many of you, looking at that, said to yourselves just now, I would not have done that. I would have stopped to help. Raise your hands if that thought occurred to you. As I thought, that's most of you. And I believe you, I'm sure you're right. But before you give yourself too much credit, look at this. UNICEF reports that in 2011, 6.9 million children under 5 died from preventable poverty-related diseases. UNICEF thinks that that's good news because the figure has been steadily coming down from 12 million in 1990. That is good. But still, 6.9 million is 19,000 children dying every day. Does it really matter that we're not walking past them in the street? Does it really matter that they're far away? I don't think it does make a morally relevant difference. The fact that they're not right in front of us, the fact, of course, that they're of a different nationality or race, none of that seems morally relevant to me. What is really important is, can we reduce that death toll? Can we save some of those 19,000 children dying every day? And the answer is, yes, we can. Each of us spends money on things that we do not really need.
So he's asking people for donations. He's not asking people to completely change their lives, but he's asking people to make the optimal choice when it comes to how they spend their money. And he has provided, together with a group of students, PhD students, students like you, undergraduates, that have created these platforms in order to try and assess what is the best use. For example, some people think, I really want to help these people, therefore I'm not going to pursue any career. I'm just going to go to Africa and work with these kids in order to volunteer. But effective altruism says, actually, you can do the most good by doing what it is that you're passionate about. Let's say you're passionate about finance and banking, that's completely okay, because if you're really good at what you do and you make a lot of income and you donate 10% of that income, you can sponsor a lot more volunteers that will go to Africa. So they're trying to work together with you in order to make the most good of your time and your resources in order to make an optimal thing. They're also calling for people to make a pledge, an easy pledge that a lot of people can do about donating 10% of all their future incomes. So maybe now it seems a little bit difficult for you to think about this, but 10% is not much. We can still have good, comfortable, easy lives, but then with the 10% of all our future income is something that we can really use in order to drive the effective altruism movement. They have also worked with Bill Gates and Warren Buffett in order to get them to donate most of their. So Warren Buffett, for example, says that when he passes away, all his wealth is going to be donated. He has worked not only with billionaires but also with people from all across the industries, from academics to bankers and finance, in order to donate. And there's more and more people who are taking the pledge in order to donate 10% of their time, and they guarantee. And they're very clear and transparent, the highest transparency, open science about how they use the money and how they evaluate how each of the organizations that they donate to are using your money by trying to optimize the greater good. So inspiring stuff. We don't have a lot of time to go into this in more detail, but I strongly recommend that if you want to do good in this world, if you care about this kind of thing, then go and check out the Effective Altruism movement. So what we do as psychologists, as philosophers, as economists, has real implications for life, not just with self-driving autonomous vehicles, but how to solve some of the world's biggest challenges in terms of poverty, health, and creating a better world for all of us. Talk more about that in the upcoming weeks. You have some challenges ahead of you, part 2. Anything that you want to talk about and discuss, welcome to talk to us on Slack. I'll see you next week.